Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Linda, and I'm originally from Michigan, now living in the St. Louis metro area. I'm a college coach with School Match for You and have a daughter at University of Chicago.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a wellness coach at the Keenan Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And I'm so blessed to be able to work alongside both my beautiful daughters at School Match for You, college counseling firm that I founded in 2010. Good afternoon, friends. If you're new to the Your College Bound Kid podcast, our mission is to make college knowledge available to all. We have episodes every Monday and Thursday, and we deliver over 10 hours of commercial-free content a month, thanks to the generosity of our listeners. We have 9 co-hosts who collectively have over 200 years of experience in admissions and counseling. And our focus is on college is a match to be made and not a prize to be won. Now, on today's episode, I want to share a new trend that I'm noticing. Now, our longtime listeners may remember, but we had a survey of our listeners we did in 2022, of which around 250 of you completed. It was a pretty detailed survey. And the thing that scored the highest in terms of where your interest level was the highest, what content you wanted to see the most, was admission trends and admissions tips. We tested all of these different things. You had a choice of like 9. Now, I'm going to share a trend I am noticing today. And I'm speaking for myself on this one. I haven't even asked any of our other co-hosts if they're experiencing this like I am with the students I'm working with. But it's so obvious to me that this is a new trend. I'd be absolutely gobsmacked if the others on the team didn't agree with me. I was going to do the final part of my series on holistic admissions. Done 2 parts already, but I'm pushed that back a week because this trend is on my mind. It's coming up a lot, and I want to cover today with some depth. And I'm trying to keep these Monday episodes a little shorter. They've been running a little longer than we had planned. Next, I'm going to share a tip with you about the personal statement. And then we will have the final part of Sapna and Sivan, twins from Rochester, who sent in a question that pulled on Julia's heartstrings and my heartstrings. It was kind of endearing. If you missed Thursday's episode, you may want to go back and listen to it because we answered most of it there. And the first part of the question had to do with how to use the additional information section for the Common App. But now we're answering part 2 of that question. It has more to do with the appropriate use of AI in the activity section. So you'll have that. And then finally, we'll have the final segment of Linda's interview with Jay Hall, author of the book College Unpacked. And they've mostly discussed the book already and transitioning from high school to college. Today really is focusing on some advice that Jay Hall has for all of our listeners. So let's dive into our content for the day. So what is this new trend I'm noticing? Well, before I share it, I want to go over the admissions funnel. For those of you in sales, you'll be familiar with this because it's very similar to what's often called the sales funnel, just an admissions version of it. So it starts with prospects. And a prospect is literally anyone who has the potential to be a student in your class. Even if this person has no idea your school even exists, they may have never heard of your school, they could still be a prospect. Now, it's not uncommon for calls to have 500,000 to 1 million prospects for a given class in their database. And we've talked multiple times about how colleges can buy lists of names through student search, oftentimes just called search, and then creatively come up with a system to target through email marketing and through direct mail. Usually, well, it depends on the school, but usually 100,000 to 500,000, and sometimes more than 500,000, and sometimes less than 100,000 students for the upcoming class. So that's prospects. And then from there, you go to inquiries. Now, an inquiry is someone who has taken at least one step of initiative toward the college. Think of yourself as a fisherman with your worm on a rod, and you feel a fish nibbling on your worm. That's an inquiry, somebody who's nibbling. Now, there's a lot of ways a prospect becomes an inquiry, but here are just a half dozen of them so I can give you some examples if you're curious like what I'm talking about here. And this is by no means an exhaustive list. You stop by college at a fair, fill out an inquiry card, now you're an inquiry. You go on their website, request information, now you're an inquiry. A college comes by your school, you go to the session, you're an inquiry, you've taken an initiative step. You do a virtual visit. And it doesn't even have to be like on one of the direct sources from the college. A lot of times when you go on and do these virtual tours, you'll notice they ask you for your contact information. Colleges get that information. That's going to make you an inquiry. In-person visit, obviously, would make you an inquiry. Emailing a question into the school would make you an inquiry, or calling the school. And I'm going to speak about another one later today. So I can be very garrulous at times. So let me pick up the pace a little here. This isn't all about the admissions funnel. So next we have an applicant, then we have an admitted applicant, then we have someone who's deposited, and hopefully they don't melt over the summer and they show up and they're enrolled and they're matriculated. So that's what we call the admissions funnel. This wasn't supposed to be a session on the admissions funnel, but just having this background will help you to understand where I'm going here with this trend. Now, in very competitive situations, colleges are always analyzing their admissions funnel and they're saying, where are we having the drop off? Where are we losing people along the funnel? And friends, we're in a very competitive admissions environment. This is something we've talked about ad nauseum on the podcast. I know we get new listeners all the time. So if you're relatively new, I'll just hit on some of the reasons why it's so competitive briefly. We have the birth dearth, also known as the enrollment cliff or the demographic cliff. Less kids are being born right now, which means less kids with even the potential to go to college. Then we have a lower percentage of the population convinced of the value of college. And that breaks down into multiple categories. Some of it is people thinking college is too woke, too much liberal indoctrination. For others, it's a holdover from the global financial crisis in 2008, when more graduates were unemployed or underemployed. So in that case, more people are thinking the ROI, the return on the investment, isn't there. Then we have frustration with the cost of college rising at a much faster rate than salaries. And also, I would even throw in there the confusion with the cost. And cost being all over the place, but everything to do with the cost is frustration. And then we have things like growing alternatives. It's apprenticeships or badges, certificates, online education, all that stuff. So those are just some of the reasons why colleges feel assailed, colleges feel under attack. Colleges are really, really struggling to meet their class. Even selective colleges are struggling to meet their class. I had a student this week that I worked with who reached out to me, and this is a student from New York who was going to UT Austin, picked UT Austin over Miami. Those are his final two choices. And he reaches out to me literally a couple of days ago, and he says, I just got in UNC Chapel Hill. What should I do? So, I'm not used to UNC Chapel Hill having an opening almost July 1st. And that's one of the most competitive schools out there. So what happens in these more competitive environments? How do you handle it? Well, lots of things, right? You can change and modify your recruitment, and your marketing. You can also evaluate whether you have the right size school. And I've got an interview coming up in July with someone who will speak about their college going through and asking themselves, are we the right size, or do we need to downsize and make some changes? But let's go back to the change of modifying your recruitment and marketing. One of the things everyone is going to try to do is to have a higher conversion rate from inquiries to apps. That's why I took you through the admissions funnel, because I want to kind of hang my hat here for a while. So I'm going to share a story. I shared this several years ago on the podcast, but it was years ago. Once again, we get new listeners. So I was having a conversation with an admission officer who worked at a women's college. And she was just saying, it's really tough out there. She says, first of all, half the population can't come to our school. And then more than half of the other half, talking about women, don't want to go to a women's college. By the way, the most recent stat I saw was 92% of women are not interested in attending a women's college. And that would be consistent with our data for my company. And I'd say we push people a little bit more to at least explore it and visit and take, but sometimes, if people are just dug in, they're dug in. And it's not for everybody. But the bottom line is, I'm having this conversation with her, like, it's tough out there. So I said, well, let me share an idea with you that I found really helpful. I used to be the director of recruitment. I was over our recruitment strategy. And I learned this like my 6th year in, maybe 7th year in. I was in San Francisco and I'm at a college fair there and, doing all the stuff you do when you recruit and travel. You do receptions and you visit consultants and alumni and, parents and you do all that stuff. But I'm at this fair and I'm having a conversation with this rep about recruitment strategy. And she'd been doing it 25 years. She's from actually from British Columbia. And she said, the most effective thing I ever learned for recruitment was, and she literally does this. She has a map in her office of North America. And she looks at where all the stakeholders are. So, that could be parents. It could be a lot of alumni, and friends of the school. And she puts a pin on the map. So then you can see clusters. Now online, you can do this in a lot more sophisticated ways. But anyway, I was telling you this is a while ago. This is like, probably like 2007. And then she takes a look at that. And then she says, well, where are my raving fans? Where are my zealots in these areas? And when she identifies an area, you've got a lot of zealous people there for your school. Then she asked them if they would host receptions and invite their friends, invite anybody at all with kids. And then you reach out to schools, you look into your database and you see who you've got in the area and you invite them. And so this was just, she said, was the most effective idea. So I started doing this and it was incredibly effective. And so I'm talking to, this admission officer at this women's college. I said, and I share this idea with her and she says, we go one step further. We try to meet every single inquiry in person at like a Starbucks or similar kind of venue like that. So we can have like a informal one-on-one, like casual 30-minute conversation. Because each inquiry is so precious that we have to like give it our best. We can't afford to just casually treat every inquiry because there's a lot of people that aren't interested in women's colleges. And I was like, that's awesome. So why did I share all that? Because that's what I'm seeing schools do now. I'm not saying they're meeting everyone at a Starbucks, but the difference I'm seeing I started to notice this last year and I've really noticed it this year, is that so many schools are reaching out to the juniors in the spring, meaning now, and trying to get them to interview. Now, we probably call it casual conversation because it's not supposed to be this high pressure thing. Although they reach out to me because they feel pressure. But why are they doing that? It's because if you can give people a high touch experience, then you're going to have a higher conversion rate from inquiries to applicants. And as it gets more competitive out there, colleges have to up their recruitment game. And one way to up your recruitment game is to get a lot more personal. Now, you're usually not going to see this for those at the proverbial top of the pecking order. That's not really where you see it. You see it just a notch down from there. So don't look for this from Georgetown or MIT. Now, why did I say Georgetown or MIT? Those are two schools that, as long as I've been doing this work, so that's more than 25 years, they have put a pretty significant emphasis on the interview, much more so than other schools do. For Georgetown and MIT, though, they're not doing an interview until, they're doing it one with seniors in the fall and seniors in the fall who've applied. This is different. This is totally different. That's an evaluative interview for people who are already applicants, trying to assess whether or not you feel they're a good fit for your institution. This is totally different. This is with people who may not even apply, and you're hoping to move them down that admissions funnel from an inquiry to an applicant. So I just thought that this might be of interest to you. Literally this morning, family I'm working with in New York sent me a text and said, "What do you think about this?" Lewis and Clark reaching out, trying to get them to see if they'll be willing to do an interview. And by the way, I tell people, go ahead and do the interview. If it's a school that you're interested in, do the interview. For one, it's a test of demonstrated interest and engagement. For some, they're trying to move you along the admissions funnel. And also, they're trying to see who they should prioritize in their outreach. So, but from your standpoint, one, if it's a school you're interested in, that's tracking engagement levels and doing some of that stuff, which is on the increase as well, right? Modeling out who they think serious about them and who's not. So that redounds to your benefit. But the other thing is it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to learn more about the school. I always tell people these encounters are like first dates, and both sides are trying to decide if they want a second date. So go ahead and do it and come with some good questions. Relax. It is an evaluative. It's their attempt to be high touch, knowing if they give you a more personal experience, you're more likely to convert from an inquiry to an applicant. I guess that was actually a tip. I thought of it as a trend, but actually it's more of a tip also because I'm telling you to take advantage of that opportunity. So it's both a tip and a trend, but let's transition to our second tip. All right, for the personal statement, seriously consider a topic that is unique, novel, and interesting. Now, not just content, but a topic that's unique, novel, and interesting. Now, here's the challenge. If you're a DIYer, a do-it-yourselfer, you may think a topic is interesting and unique, but you should assume the average admission officer is going to read 1,000 to 2,000 applications. Some read less, some read more, but most of them full-time are going to read in 1,000 to 2,000. That's standard. These have big caseloads. That's a lot of personal statements to read. And an AO is going to be more excited to read about a topic for the first, second, or third time than the 50th, 25th, 75th, or 100th time. That's just human nature. I mean, when you read your favorite novel for the third or fourth time, I bet it's not as exciting as the first. Same for your favorite movie. Now, I do occasionally watch a movie. And one of my favorite movies is Father of the Bride, especially part one. I like part one more than part two. And Karis and I, we like to watch it together. And we were at an Airbnb in Helen, Georgia about a month ago. And we were watching it again. Now, it's kind of taken on a little bit more significance because she's in a serious relationship. So, yes, I've had to start the wedding fund. And we had a great time. But it was my fourth time seeing it. And it still wasn't quite like the first time. There's nothing quite like that, right? So the tip is to be novel, be creative, but also to bounce off your topic with someone who reads a lot of applications to make sure it is unique and interesting. Because you might think it's unique and interesting to you, but if someone who's reading 1,500 applications, they may read your topic 40, 50, 60 times. I'll give you an example of something that probably sounds unique and interesting, but it actually isn't. So I work with a decent number of Jewish students every year. And I've actually never really run the numbers, but if I had to estimate who I work with, and it just works out this way, just based on who refers who, right? I would say 1/5 of my students are Jewish, 1/5 are Caucasian, non-Jewish, 1/5 are South Asian, mostly Indian, but, Sri Lankan is in there, a decent number. 1/5 Black American, that's including a decent sized Nigerian population that's over here. And then 1/5 everyone else. Hispanic, Latino, multiracial, biracial, Native American, and international. That's about 1/5. And while I'm not Jewish, I learn a lot from my Jewish students and about Judaism. And one teaching that has had a profound impact on a lot of the students that I work with Especially, I've noticed it in the last 6 years. And it's called Tikkun Olam, which means fixing the world or healing the world. Once again, I'm not a Jewish scholar, but over and over and over, my Jewish students, especially the ones who are more social justice oriented, want to write their personal statements on Tikkun Olam and how it has impacted their lives. And I literally said to one of them this week, I said, nothing is wrong with writing on Tikkun Olam, but let's have a unique twist on it. Let's make it fresh, because this is just me and my experience. But 1 out of every 4 students I've worked with in the last 6 years has wanted to write their personal statement on how Tikkun Olam has impacted them. What's interesting, I didn't nearly have that many that used to do that 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago. So maybe one of our listeners in the Jewish community can explain to me why there's such an increased interest in writing on Tikkun Olam. I don't know, but I can definitely, I see trends and I see experiences, and there's no doubt in my mind there's a rise. So what do you do? Because what if you're like, snap, my topic is not unique. My topic is not interesting. Guess what? That's okay, because you can always have a unique twist on it, so it's fresh for the reader. For example, here's a personal statement somebody could write on. They hardly got any playing time on the soccer field. In 9th grade, they got cut. 10th grade, they made JV. 11th grade, they made varsity. They hardly got any time. But then in the big game senior year, they got the winning goal on the penalty kick. Boring. Been there, done that, bought the t-shirt one too many times. But if your topic is being on a soccer team, still a lot of ways you could go with that. Susan and I said this back when we did our personal statement discussion 2019, interview 27, if you want to go check that one out. We both like sports essays. So for all the people out there that say, don't write sports, everybody writes on sports, we could not disagree more. But it's just kind of having a twist on it. So it's not the predictable sports topic, which you get all too often on the injury or the big goal, those kinds of things. So let's say your topic was this. When I wasn't playing soccer, when I was on the sidelines, I listened and I learned so much about myself from what fans screamed out. When they said, "Great effort, Cliff," I realized people can actually tell when you work hard, and you can go on and reflect about that. When they said, "Cliff, you're dogging it out there," I learned people can tell when you're slacking off. But I also learned to develop thick skin, because sometimes they would say, "Cliff, you should have passed to number 9. But that wasn't what the coach wanted me to do. So I learned to block out the noise and not be a people pleaser. Of course, you'd go on and amplify all these points, right? Because the personal statement is about me learning important things about you, your values, your interests, your personal qualities in a way that inspires me, so I see what you will be bringing to add value to our campus. So see how you take a common topic, being on a team, and you turned it into a novel essay about your personal qualities, values, ideas, and perspectives? So it's okay to have an uncommon topic, but you got to put a twist on it, because people are human, and it's human nature to get bored when you read something over and over and over again. All right, it's time for part 2 of Sapna and Sivan's question. I'll play it again for you, and Julie and I will discuss it.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Hi, Mr. Stucker. I'm Sapna. And I'm Sivan. We're twins from upstate New York. We just finished our junior year, and our dad is an avid listener and never misses an episode. He often shares your content with us, and we have found it super helpful in our college process, so we thank you for that. We have a couple questions. First, can the additional info section of the Common App be used to further explain an activity or expand on a senior year capstone or research project, or is it just used for describing personal or extenuating situations? Secondly, recently my high school counselor recommended that when writing our activity descriptions under the activities section on the Common App, we should write them all ourselves and then can use AI to trim them down to make sure they stay below 150 characters. My question is about the use of AI in this situation because it feels wrong, but I was just wondering what your advice and opinion on the matter was. Thank you. Thank you.
So let's get to the last part
Yeah.
of the
That's a great question.
question. Yeah, we have our part two, and totally different, but also just
Still
as
related to the activities section a little bit.
Yep, absolutely. So we want to make sure that we answer this for Sapna and Sivan. Well, just so everyone, if anyone forgets that, because we've been chatting it up here a while. So there was also a part of the question: is it right or wrong to use AI to help you with your efficiency and maybe getting it into the 150 50 characters? Is that either unethical? That word wasn't used, but I think what was implied was, is it just wrong?
Right.
Is it wrong, or is it either that or maybe too mechanical or something that it's not wise? So let's say either imprudent or unethical, or something in between, like just not something that should be eschewed. What are your thoughts?
This was a great question, and I will be honest. The adults on also in this process are having the same conversations
Yeah.
with each other as
Yeah.
well. I actually think I'm going to give two caveats, but I personally think this is a great use of AI for this explicit purpose to figure out, okay, here's what I want to say. I only have 150 characters. So how can you help me sort of get it into a syntax and cadence and word count that, or letter count, character count that works for this? And I, like Mark, you're probably in the same boat. Sometimes I spend hours on an activities list with this very thing, being like, okay, we whittle it down from on Sundays, I take my grandmother to go to the bank, and then we go to the grocery store to like caretaker for grandmother, help with bills, right?
Sure.
So I actually think this is exactly what it's meant for. It probably will actually be very helpful, not just to cut out time, but it allows your activities list to be consistent and efficient. And you've really maximized. The other thing about ChatGPT, knows how to write these, so, or AI sources, so like they will put in your action verbs and things like that. So it is a really great tool. My one, I have like a 1.5 caveat here, is that I did work at a school earlier where students were really encouraged to use AI in their writing. And when it came time to introduce that to the college process, I never saw any of them like have, AI write anything for them, but really what they were using mostly for essays, not the activities list. So this doesn't really relate, because to me, the activities list, you don't need like your voice present, if that makes sense. Whereas very much so for your other writing. But they would say like, I've got my intro paragraph, but this sentence seems really off. ChatGPT, can you fix this sentence for me, or like make it sound a little bit better? And that was helpful in the moment. But I got to tell you, my students, after or before they submitted their applications, they started to get really paranoid that a college would run parts of their Common App through the AI detector, and then all of a sudden it'd be like, oh my gosh, I was fraudulent. And so I will say, like, they didn't sleep super well at night when they did use ChatGPT, even though I never saw anyone use it heavily or in an inappropriate way. And then my other caveat is that some colleges actually put what is acceptable use of AI in your application. They'll spell it out for you. And I don't know of any that have explicitly said like no to helping with your activities list. But there is one college I can think of that just has some plain language that says the use of any AI and the making of this app would be considered like not okay by us. So in some ways, like, it feels weird to be like, go ahead and do it, don't worry about it. But I would hope and think that for that explicit purpose of using AI to just make sure your activities list is proper and fit, I think that's a good use of AI, just knowing that there's some small risks out there that might be personal or non-existent.
You brought up a lot of great points. I mean, for the most part, I'm very comfortable with it. I do think you should still make sure it sounds like you.
Yep.
just when you look at it, just make sure it sounds like you. I mean, at least something that would be in the realm of what you would say, not,
Right. Not like some big like verbs in the activity
yeah,
section that you're like, well, I'm
yeah,
gonna use that. Yeah.
yeah. But one thing I do with my students quite a bit, anytime there's sort of one of these judgment kind of things, I do tell them to like craft a generic. I mean, a same email for every school. Be very, very careful not to use, Indiana when you're writing Purdue and
Yeah.
when you're writing Indiana, right? But just send that off and ask them, and it's a real peace of mind for people, and it's a good question. Like, it's a kind of question that anybody would respect on the other end, respect you for wanting to be ethical for asking it.
Totally.
And so this is one that wouldn't be a bad idea to do that, just for the reason you mentioned, just in case a school does have a very strict AI policy. Like you, I don't know of anyone for whom this would be some transgression,
Right.
but I'm also like, we're so in flux and so much is changing, and people have different schools are independent and they have different, so I just, from a caution standpoint, I almost think you can't, to play it safe, it wouldn't be a bad idea just to check.
Yeah.
But my reflexive reaction is, I'm going to be really surprised if somebody comes back and says, we would consider that to be inappropriate. That will surprise me. I certainly don't know of anyone.
Yeah.
So I think we land at the exact same place on this one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sapna and Sivan. Send us more questions.
Great questions. And thanks, Dad, for being an avid fan.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks, Dad, for being an avid fan. And don't forget to request your book.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Okay, friends, we've reached the final part of Jay Hall's interview with Lynda Depker. Jay's from Oklahoma. He's a dean, college professor, author, educator, podcaster, and parent. And Jay gives his advice, and he gives it for three groups. He gives it for students, he gives it for parents, and he gives it for college counselor. Jay goes on the hot seat, and Jay and Lynda end up discussing a lot of books and movies. Hope you enjoyed the last part of Jay Hall in his interview with Lynda Depker. Listen and enjoy.
So, Jay, you have gone through this experience with 4 of your own students. And given all of that, what is your one piece of advice for our 3 different audiences? For students, we do have a few that listen, but parents and also for college counselors.
Okay. For students, all the time, I tell my students this all the time. I tell all students this all the time. It is your education. And that means a couple of things. One, that you are going to get out of it what you choose to put into it. And I am not so naive as to not understand that college can be 100% transactional. Here are the rules. Here are the things you need to do. Do the things you need to do. You agree. That's out there. That's possible. That is a way that you can navigate college. That's a great way to navigate college because all you get out of that is a degree. When you invest in your classes, when you invest in relationships, when you get to know professors, take opportunities to do research or go on study abroad or go to service project with your friends, you are getting so much more than just a degree. You're learning about the world, you're learning about people, you're learning about all kinds of things. And that is the point of college. The point of college is not a piece of paper. Now, for some, if that's your thing, good on you, but I'm just telling you that's not what we're here for. We give those out, that's part of it, but it is not the biggest. But the other thing I will say for that, it's your education, is that you get to own what your education looks like. And that can be challenging sometimes to moms and dads. And families are going to do what families are going to do from my perspective and the way we interact with our kids. When they were ready to change majors, we had a conversation about what it looked like. And then, okay, if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. One of my colleges just wasn't for them at the time. And after a couple of years, they're like, Dad, this isn't for me. And okay, that's okay. What does the next step look like? And so having that conversation as well. So for your education, for parents, it's their education. And that's a hard conversation sometimes, right?
Yeah.
They years old and beyond. And it's time for them to start that process of becoming an adult. And if they decide they want to become a major that makes no sense to you, now, if you're paying for it, that's a different, you have that conversation, whatever way you need to take it. But I mean, they're the one that's going to have to live with the choices that they make. And that's hard for us to watch sometimes as parents because we kind of know what the out that might be. And so we advise and we coach and we encourage. I have seen too many times in too many places where parents hold well, we're paying for it, so you're going to go get a pre-med degree, and your student's miserable, whatever, I'm not a mental health, so I can't talk about that side of it, but I know it takes to bad places. And I know you asked me for one thing, and I'm adding all of these things to the one thing, but also because it's their mom and dad, stay out of it. You don't have to tell me, but when they run into academic challenges, they've got to navigate those. When they run into roommate challenges, they have to navigate those. When they get an argument with a professor, they have to navigate that because we can't always talk to you about it. And I, all the time, have very frustrated parents on the phone with me saying, I demand to know the student, and I have to say, I legally can't talk with you about that. And it's a really frustrating conversation for them, which then means that I get to hear, sometimes colorful language. I've been threatened they're going to come beat me up. It's all kinds of fun stuff. He didn't show up.
Oh,
but understanding that, like, it's their education. It's their, and if you're in, I understand, moms and dads, you're investing crazy amounts of money, but you need to, that's what you are investing in. To counselors, academic counselors, I think the best piece of advice I can give is to just listen and really, really listen to what a student is saying and to what they're not necessarily saying, but they're also conveying. Sometimes in the advising space and that counseling space, we're just rubber stamping stuff because there's so many of them. We haven't advised to our division, and I don't know when she sleeps. Because when advising season hits, there are thousands of students trying to get her and her staff's attention. And, I don't know how that works. But to take the time to really listen to what these students are saying, both with their words and with their actions and the way they're interacting with the campus and their degree plan, and then use your knowledge to guide them rather than using your knowledge just to get them through to the next. And I know there are tons of very dedicated advisors and counselors, and that's not how most of them operate. But I think it's just good to maybe be reminded again, because it's their education, listen and help them down the road that they want to go, and that may not be the road that is the easy prescribed degree plan path.
I don't think reminding people to listen is ever a bad idea. Well, Jay, thank you for your time, but no one gets out of here on their first visit without answering a few hot seat questions.
All right, let's do it.
Okay, so now you are an author and you host a podcast where you talk to authors.
I do.
So you read a lot of books, I'm guessing.
I do.
But I'm not going to ask you what your favorite book is.
Good, because that would be bad.
I know.
That'd be longer than anything else I've said.
But I am going to ask you, what is your favorite movie adaptation of a book?
Oh, that's a great. So my daughter and I just were having this conversation on the podcast last week. We were talking about stuff that we were excited about coming up. I'm stalling now to try to come up with a good answer to that question. I'm trying to think of something that just really, I'll tell you what it is. Because it's the one that jumped to my head, and it's probably the most faithful adaptation of a book that I have encountered, and that is The Martian.
Oh,
The Andy Weir novel, the movie with Matt Damon. I love that book. I'm a huge science fiction and science nerd, and so I love the hard science. And Andy Weir was a rocket scientist for NASA, so he kind of knew what was going on with. And the way they adapted the book, both the humor and the way they managed to portray that loneliness, but also his willingness to, buckle down and figure out how to solve problems. Love the book. I love the movie. And I think it's a really great adaptation.
that's a great answer. And I agree with you. Now, are you excited about Project Hail Mary?
I cannot wait for Project Hail Mary. I love that book, but I am excited with trepidation because I have been burned before by adaptations that didn't go the way I wanted them to go. And that's going to be a hard book app. So I'm really interested to see what they do with Rocky and how they handle a lot of that other.
I'm excited for it, and I love that book too. And I read it quickly because it just captivated me.
Right.
I am very concerned that I'm going to be so scared by the portrayal of Rocky that I'm not
Yeah.
going to be able to get over it. I just skimmed over the parts where they described it. And listeners, sorry, if you haven't read Project Hail Mary, it is a terrific
Read Project Hail Mary.
Science fiction book.
Yes.
So as a reader, are you a physical book guy or a Kindle or both?
I am an all of the above guy. So I love physical books. I love going to bookstores. I love holding books in my hand. I even love the process of occasionally falling asleep while I'm reading and having them hit me in the face. Like there's just something about that is part of life. But I also travel that I have come to really value my Kindle, because there were times when I would be going somewhere for a week and packing 4 or 5 books to take with you is kind of a pain and a lot to carry. I'm also an audio, and I will stand right now and make the statement that listening to audiobooks is reading.
That's very controversial.
I know. Oh, listen, you don't have to tell me.
I agree with you, but I know that's very controversial. I think it counts as reading too. So
Absolutely.
the Lynda stamp of approval for that. And then lastly, what is your bucket list travel destination and why?
I have wanted to go to Iceland for 30 years. I'm fascinated by that culture. I am fascinated by the geography of it. You know, a place that is green and also has glaciers and volcanoes and just the fact that you could get in a car and drive all the way around it in not too much time, see all of that world. So that is at the top of my list. I mean, there's places I've had the great fortune to go to a lot of places I want to go. That's one I haven't been able to make yet. So my wife and I keep talking about it to keep going to college and spending the money. So the time's going to come. We're going to get there someday. Not too long from now.
I think that would be a terrific trip. It is definitely on my list as well.
Oh, yeah.
So, Jay, thank you for your time, but please tell our listeners how they can learn more about College Unpacked and everything else you do. Where can they find you?
Absolutely. So I'll give you a couple of websites. My author website is jhallwriter, and that's WRITER.com. And you can find more about College Unpacked and my other 4 young dads there, and all the other projects that I'm working on and are coming up. My author site, the site for the podcast that you mentioned, and thanks for bringing that up for just a second, is okiebookcast.com, and tons of set of author interviews and 2 or 3 years worth of book recommendation podcast conversations with my daughter. A ton of fun. We love that project and lots of other things related to books and reading. And then on social media, it's OkiBookcast everywhere. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, at OkiBookcast. And from there, you can find, I talk about not just the podcast, but also College Unpacked and all of the different things related to that.
Wonderful. All right. Jay, thank you so much for the conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Lynda. This has been a lot of fun.
Take care.
Friends, on Thursday's episode, Kevin Newton is back. He's going to join me to answer a question from a listener who also is named Kevin, who's from Arizona. Kevin will answer Kevin's question about going to college in China if you want to come back to the U.S. for med school. We'll have a second question, and it's from Emily from Seattle. She actually has several questions, very good questions, about submitting standardized testing to test optional colleges. And Julia will join me to answer Emily's questions. For our college spotlight, Adrienne Amador Odi, the Vice President of Strategic Enrollment and Communications at Queen's University in Charlotte, will be helping us to understand Queen's University in Charlotte. That'll run over the next 2 weeks. And friends, remember, it's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's what you do when you get there. It's what you do when you get out of there. That is what will determine your career success or your career lack of success. And I believe that every fiber of my being. See you on Thursday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, Please follow us and you will get every single episode as soon as they are released. If you want to support our podcast, you can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can say positive things about your college-bound kid on your social media feed. And you can help us stay commercial-free and pay our staff by donating on the yourcollegeboundkid website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. And if you have a question or a recommendation, just go to speakpipe.com/YCBK, hit the orange button, and speak. We will do our best to get your question in your own voice on an upcoming episode. I am the producer of the podcast, and I live in Metro Atlanta. We have a fantastic team that has over 200 years of admissions and counseling experience. Shout out to our co-hosts, Dr. Lisa Ruff in North Carolina, Susan Tree in Pennsylvania, Vince Garcia in California, Julia Esquivel in Massachusetts, Linda Depker in Missouri, Andy Strickler, the Chief Enrollment Officer at Connecticut College, New London, Connecticut, Hillary Dickman, an Admission Officer at Colorado College in Colorado Springs, and our International Admissions Expert, Kevin Newton in Dallas, Texas. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs from Kimberly Bloss. Our reliable webmaster is Stylionos Dimitru. Website updates are done by Joyce Stucker. Our image editor is Vlad Honchar. If you want to have a coaching session with me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you want to reach someone else on our team, all of our bios with contact info can be found at yourcollegeboundkid.com under the About YCBK tab. If you want to get our free monthly YCBK newsletter, YCBK Plus, it is also under the About YCBK tab. If you want to see our recommended books and websites, they are on our website under the Resources tab. While you're on our website, check out our hundreds of interviews in their entirety. Check out our college spotlights, our blog, and our upcoming events. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting with you every single Monday and every single Thursday.